I think we probably will make a start, and obviously folks can join us, but just to introduce the three of us today that are with you. There's myself, Rachel Legg, there's Kritesh Patel and Pam Atkins, and we're all independent financial advisors with Daffins Wealth. The session this evening has actually been requested, especially by somebody who attended a previous session and sort of said to us, can you do a session just on pensions and retirement planning? So that's what we've come up with tonight. Hopefully, if you have any questions, we've got time at the end, but because we're quite a small group, we've probably got plenty of opportunity to ask as we go through the session. About half an hour, as I say, please do just sort of wave at me, or we've got Sophie in the background, who you can't see at the moment. Sophie is sort of controlling the session, and we'll be able to see if you have any questions as we go through. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover tonight. We've got an agenda, which we will go through, hopefully when Sophie pops the next slide up. That's brilliant, thanks Sophie. So we're independent advisors, independent financial advisors, working with Daffins Wealth. So that means that we've got no obligation or allegiance to any other firms or providers or anything. So you get our sort of our individual view this evening. In terms of the agenda, we've got a lot to pack in. You'll see it's quite a long agenda. So we're going to have a quick look at how you save for retirement. What options do you have? Because it's not necessarily all just about pensions. We'll have a quick look at the state pension, how all of that works and when you can expect to receive it. There's more than one type of pension, and we're just going to have a quick look at that. What is a defined benefit pension and what is a defined contribution pension, and how all of that actually works and what it means for you. We're then going to have a look at the tax benefits of pension saving. Why is a pension a useful way to save for retirement over perhaps putting money in a bank account, for example. Kritesh is then going to take over and look at the idea of risk when you're investing, because there are different types of risk, and actually a lot of it comes down to how you personally feel about taking risk as well. I'm sure if you've been working for more than a couple of years, you may well have accumulated more than one pension. So we're going to have a look at the question of, should you consolidate pension pots? And that might be a different answer depending on your own situations. Next, we're going to have a look at when you can actually take your pensions from and how you draw those benefits. How old do you have to be to do that? And then when you've left here tonight and when we've all sort of said cheerio, what action should you take next? What should you actually be doing? And then, as I say, we'll have some time for questions, but probably, seeing as there are only 4 of you currently, we'll take questions as we go along. So I'm going to hand over to Pam now, and Pam's going to start looking at what options you've got for saving for retirement.
Hello everybody, and good evening. I'm going to be taking you through the next few slides. And we're firstly going to start off with one of the most important questions, I suppose, when we're looking at retirement, is how do I save for my retirement? Well, you do have a few options, but the most tax efficient option you will probably be not surprised to hear of is your pension, okay? And that's whether you pay contributions into a personal pension or a group pension. Of those pensions, you will actually receive tax relief. Okay, so if you're actually paying in £80 in contribution into your pension, the government, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, gives you a nice little £20 to top that up, so 20% of anything that you actually put in, making your contribution up to £100. And then when you actually come to draw a pension, some of your pension is what's known as tax-free cash. Usually that's 25% of your pot of money. It does depend on what type of pension you actually have. So you can take that out all as one sum or as a regular regular income from your pension. And any growth in the pension grows free of tax. So there's no capital gains implications that you have to worry about. And furthermore, any money that's in your pension is ring-fenced for inheritance tax purposes, which you'll be, happy to know. So a number of tax efficient reasons as to why pension savings is good for your retirement. You then also have the option of an ISA, and I'm sure many of you have heard more about ISAs than some of the other alternatives that I have on my screen. And an ISA is another good form of savings, whether that's a cash ISA or stocks and shares ISA. Both these forms of investments are free and can grow free of any tax. And when you come to draw any money from your ISA, that is also tax free. And as you can see in there in the little bracket there, a lifetime ISA, that's applicable to people in the age ranges of 18 and 14, is where you can actually pay into an ISA up to £4,000, and the government will actually top that up by a maximum of 1,000 if you're paying in the maximum. Some alternatives though for saving for retirement, they're slightly higher risk investments. So venture capital trusts and enterprise investment schemes are higher risk type of investments where they invest in private companies or AIM quoted companies on the stock market. And these investments are government backed kind of programs. It doesn't mean to say that they are risk free, because they certainly aren't risk free. But what that means is that the government sees potential in these particular companies to grow. And for the support of you investing in these companies, the government offer an income tax relief on your investment of 30%, which is nothing to be sniffed at. And I would say, if you're interested in any of these types of investments, it is best to speak to a financial advisor as to which one would be more suitable for your particular circumstances. And lastly, another option that most people think about when they look into retirement is looking into property and maybe buying a second property to supplement their income that they're getting through from their pensions or elsewhere. So with investing in property, there are a couple of things that you do need to be aware of. You know, any property value forms part of your estate for inheritance tax purposes, and there are taxes that you have to pay on the income that you actually get through from any property. So a couple of things to be aware of. I would say those are the four main areas for saving for your retirement. Can we have the next slide, please, Sophie? So in addition to what you can actually do for saving to your retirement on that previous page, there's also the state pension. And many people will probably think, oh, do you know what, it's okay, the state pension will pay me an income for the rest of my life. But there is simply no guarantee that the state pension is going to be around for the future. And the strains on the actual government are already showing with people living longer. And it's estimated that in 2034, there's going to be about 87,900 people that will reach the age of 100. So it's put an awful strain on the government and the state pension itself. On top of people living longer, the government also has to increase your pension each year, and that's usually done by means of what they call the triple lock. So there's three measurements. It's either the higher of inflation in the previous September, the average wage growth, or CPI of 2.5%. And as you probably can agree, many of those measurements have been quite high recently due to inflation increasing. So it quite possibly may not be here in the future, but I can't say that for definite, but we could say that it may change in the future. So looking after your pension and your pension savings and doing other things to help you in retirement for the future is a good move. Next slide, please, Sophie. So how much state pension will you get? Well, that is actually determined by the national insurance contributions that you make in your lifetime whilst you're working. And for a full state pension, full state pension amount is £203.85 per week, or £10,000 and 600, 10,600, shall I say, per year. It depends on the number of years that you've actually paid in national insurance contributions. So to have a full state pension, you will need to have paid in for 35 years, 35 qualifying years to get your full state pension, and a minimum of 10 years to get anything at all. You can actually find out what your forecast is and how much you're likely to get, or how many years that you've done so far, by looking on the website and on the government website, and you can say, check your pension state forecast. Next slide, please, Sophie. So as alluded to previously, there are a couple of different types of pensions, two to be exact, two different types. You have a defined benefit pension and a defined contribution benefit pension. And they are two quite different pensions. Let's start with the first one. So a defined benefit pension, otherwise known as a final salary pension. It's very rare nowadays that you actually come across these pensions with companies. The final salary pension is a guaranteed income. So you get a guaranteed income for life. And the amount you get is determined by the length of service and the accrual rate of the scheme along with your salaries. It's not actually an amount of money that you put into a pension. It's determined by different measurements. The income you actually do get, the guaranteed income, does increase, and that will be in line with scheme rules, not necessarily keeping up with inflation. So that's something to remember. And on your death, usually there is an amount of money that goes to your spouse. There is a different type of defined benefit scheme called a career average scheme, and that career average scheme depends on what your salary is over the past few years, again determined by scheme rules. So with a defined benefit contribution pension, this is probably one that you'll be more familiar with. It's where you have a pot of money and you're paying contributions, whether that's yourself or an employer, into a pension which is invested. And the amount of money that you get at the end in retirement depends on the performance of those underlying funds. However, these pensions are a lot more flexible than a defined benefit contributions, as you can take money out at various levels and in a combination of tax-free cash and taxable income, which in turn could potentially lengthen the amount of money that you have left or how long that pension will actually last you. But I would say, because these pensions are pension pots and they're invested, there could be you could run out of money in your lifetime. So that's something definitely to be aware of. And if you do have a defined contribution pension, it's always good to seek financial help to see how long your pension will last with the amount of money that you're wanting to actually take out. Next slide, please, Sophie. So what are the tax benefits of pensions? And I think I've covered a variety of these, but as I alluded to in a previous slide, you will receive tax relief on pension contribution, personal contributions, okay? And that tax relief depends on what tax band you are sitting in. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you'll receive 20% tax relief on any contributions that you make. If you are a higher rate taxpayer, that increases to 40%. And if you're an additional rate taxpayer, that increases into 45%. Employer contributions also receive tax relief on what you pay in to your pension, as with your personal contributions. You get the tax relief. With salary, let's put my teeth back in, salary sacrifice types of contributions, there could be the element of where the employer will also pay in the national contribution that they save in tax into your pension as well. It's always worth to check. The annual allowances, so the amount of money that you can actually pay into a pension has increased this year. So it's increased from 40,000 to 60,000, but you have to be earning that amount of money in order to pay that limit in. So it's the lower of the annual allowance of 60,000 or your basic salary. The lifetime allowance has also been another change recently. So it has been abolished by the Chancellor this year. So the amount of money that your pension can actually grow to has no limit. Previously, there was a limit of 1,073,100. So your pension could grow to that amount, and any money that you take thereafter would be taxed at 2 different rates, depending on how you actually were going to take that excess amount. However, the lifetime allowance still is in play for tax-free cash. So your tax-free cash is still 25% of what the lifetime allowance was of 1,073,100. which works out to be about 265, I think it is, 1,000 that you can take in tax-free cash. That's the maximum amount that you can take in tax-free cash if your pension pot has grown to more than 1,073,100. And as I mentioned previously, another good reason to plough money into your pension is that it generally doesn't form part of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So it's ring fence when it comes to that calculation and the government getting their hands on more money when you die.
Sorry, I've just got a question.
Sure.
The employer contributions, is that only 20% tax top up, or is that also at the higher rates?
It's also at the higher rate as well. So whatever your tax position is, it will be reflected in your contributions. Okay. Lovely. Shall I pass you over to my colleague Ritesh? She's going to take you through the next few slides.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, so let's talk about risk. I think this is probably one of the biggest conversations that we do have with clients, and it's a great starting point as well. When we talk about investments, different investments, they will have an element of risk. Now, some of us might be lower risk than others, some of us might be higher risk than others. So as an industry tool, as a financial advisor, when we sit with our clients, what we like to do is go through what we call a risk questionnaire, okay? Now, this will allow us to understand where you come on a risk scale between, let's say, 1 and 10, 10 being the most amount of risk and 1 being the least amount of risk. But what does that actually signify? So when we talk about portfolio construction, when it comes to pensions and ISAs or any type of investments that we look at, we need to make sure it's in your risk level. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're a risk level 5, that would be somewhere in the region of a balanced risk profile. So when we talk about portfolio construction, when we talk about these investment managers putting these portfolios together, all portfolios will have, let's say, for example, an element of cash, an element of bonds, an element of property, and an element of shares. Shares is where you get your real kind of growth, because that's the most volatile within that portfolio. So you normally have these 4 different asset classes, okay? Now, depending on your risk profile, you'll have more or less of each of those asset classes, depending on that risk profile that's generated. So, for example, if you're more down the lower end, you might have more of an element of cash, bonds, and property, and a lower element of shares within that portfolio, okay? So it all depends on, the level of risk that you want to take. And of course, as financial advisors, when we do these questionnaires with our clients, it's all about a starting point of a conversation. We can't always leave these metrics to, tools that we use. We want to make sure it's, your thoughts and what you feel as well. Sometimes, yes, there's you could be, quite, you want to take high risk, but we've also got a question: is there the capacity to take that risk? If, let's say, for example, you're looking for growth out of your pension funds or your ISAs, for example. However, if these are your only funds and you can't really afford them to, be subjected to market conditions, we'll need to take that into account. So when, these type of conversations as financial advisors, we don't just talk about the risk appetite, we talk about the capacity of the risk, and also, is there a need? For example, when Pam was talking about defined benefit pensions, it's a promise from your employer to pay your pension for life, so it's a guaranteed form of income. Now, if you've got a guaranteed income alongside your state pension, for example, and that covers and let's say, for example, you have a partner and your partner's got some guaranteed incomes, really, we've got to think you might have enough to pay all your bills and do everything you want to do without running out of money. So then when we talk about the defined contribution pensions, where there's a pot of money, we say, actually, this could be used for ad hoc luxury expenditure. So I can afford to take a bit of risk, or actually I don't need to take that risk. So we kind of de-risk it. And as you get older, there's a kind of way to actually, we want to start preserving the capital, preserving the money as we get older, so we do de-risk it. But also, some of the conversations I've been having with some of my clients, actually, if you've got enough for retirement, then actually your pension might be there as a tool to use for not only when Pam was talking about inheritance tax, but also we want to pass this money on to the next generation. So then actually we've got to think about the time frame to investment as well. If you've got, let's say, 20, 30 years that you're not going to touch, that money is going to pass to the next generation, then we can potentially take a bit more risk and actually say we've got that time for the markets to go up and down. So it was all individual to every single person. The only thing that I must stress the importance of is, one, understanding the risk that you're taking with your current investments. Two, talk to a financial advisor about risk. It's one of the biggest conversations that we have, but we need to make sure it's tailored to your needs and your kind of personal individual circumstances. Next slide, please, Sophie. Okay, so I'll talk about asset classes in the previous slide. So let's have a look at the Callum periodic table of investment returns. It looks quite a busy picture there. Each one of those colours represents a different asset class. Okay, now this is telling you what the top returns are for each asset class between 2003 and 2022. So as you can see, there's no one asset class that's always performed the best. Okay, when you have times of high inflation, bonds don't perform as well because they get hit harder in times of inflation. So what we've got to look at is actually it's a moving scale. We've got to make sure that as your journey through life goes on with your pension, your ISA, whatever it might be, we've got to make sure that your investments meet your attitude to risk, your risk profiles, and also we want to make sure that you're getting the right returns. We do use discretionary fund managers that are there to kind of tailor these portfolios to your risk. And then, they're there to run those portfolios. But, we've got to remember is past performance is not a reliable indicator of future results. When we talk about, let's say, the last 7 years, we've had so many things go on in the world. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had the Ukraine war, even like, for example, Liz Truss, those 45 days when she was in, there was a lot of market movement due to some of her let's call them shenanigans, best word for it. So, we've got to think actually your portfolios are there to give you an income in the future. We've got to look after them. And also one of the things what people don't realize is, previously when you got to retirement, you hand your pot of money over to buy an annuity. And then that was it, you get a secure income for life. But now it's going to be called drawdown. So actually, your money's still invested throughout your retirement. So we've got to make sure it's constantly looked at, making sure it meets your needs and making sure that, we're staying in the correct risk profile. Go on the next slide, please, Sophie. So should I consolidate my pension pot? It's one of the biggest questions that we get asked. As Pam was saying before, if you've been working for at least a few years, every time you change a job now, you get, most likely you get put into the auto enrollment scheme. So, every time that you might have changed jobs in the past, you might have had a pension with each one of those employers. You might have taken out your own personal pensions. So what I think the starting point to understand is when you're looking at your pension pots and before you think about consolidating them is, one, what do I actually have in place? And then secondly, what type of pensions are these? Because when Pam was talking about the defined benefit pensions, they require a financial advisor to have a set of qualifications and also the financial advisor firm being able to give you advice on that particular type of pension. So it also depends on what you have in place. And then what we've got to understand is, do your current contracts meet your objectives? So by this, what we're trying to allude to on this particular part of the slide is pension freedoms came in 2015. That's when the government shook up the pension market. What they turned around and said is, when you get to retirement, you no longer have to hand your pot of money over to an insurance company. What you can do is leave it in your own pension and draw from it as much, kind of from that pension as and when you want. The only problem is it can run out of money. So that's called drawdown. So a lot of people do go into drawdown in this day and age. So what we need to understand is if you're looking to have different types of income in different points in life, you know, for example, people want to retire a bit earlier nowadays, rather than waiting to get to 67, 68, God knows what it might be in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we don't know. You know, you might not want to wait that long to receive income. So you might want to turn to your pensions beforehand, like a lot of my clients do, or you might want to go part-time, drop some days. So you need your pension to supplement your income. So what you need to do is make sure that your pension has those flexibilities within the scheme itself. Sometimes some of the older schemes don't, you know, some of the older schemes might not have pension freedoms, like, you know, like drawdown available to it, so you have to move it. So, you know, and then we've got to think of actually, when was the last time you reviewed your existing provisions? It should be looked at on a regular basis. It's your money. You know, what I say to my clients actually when I sit down with them, do you ever look at the money in your bank account? Yes, you do. You look at it most weeks or days even. You know how much is in there. So how much is in your pension pot? I don't know. Well, why do you not know? This is still your money. You know, you should see it as it's just as much as important as your bank account. So it should be reviewed regularly. You should know what kind of risk you're taking. You should know what's going on with your retirement funds, you know. So that's where we can play a part. You know, we can most of the time with our clients, we sit down with them every year. You know, once a year is not too bad with a financial advisor. I know we're a bit boring sometimes, but you know, you can sit down with us maybe an hour or so each year and review your pension pots or your current provisions. And it just gives you that clarity, knowing that you know what's happening moving forward. Next slide, please, Sophie. So when can I take my pension and how do I draw the benefits? So you can currently access most pension benefits from 55. However, from 2028, this will increase to age 57. The only reason for this is we are living longer. Because pension freedoms allow you to access as much money as you want now. Problem the government has is there'll be a lot of people actually using their money in an unplanned way. They might run out of money, so then that'll be a drain on the resources for the country. So, as Pam said, typically you can access up to 25% of your pot as tax-free. It's capped at £268,275 unless you do have provisional protections in place. And the remaining balance can be taken in a number of ways. So as I was saying before, you've got an annuity where you hand your pot of money over to an insurance company and they give you payments either for a set period of time or it can be for life. There can be different features that you can put in there. Like for example, it can go up with a, you know, grow by a certain rate each year, or for example, you want to leave some to your spouse. There could be all sorts of different things you put into the annuity. But again, speak to a financial advisor because we'll have a look across the market to see who's going to give you the best annuity. You've got what we call UFPlus, which is uncrystallised funds pension lump sum. This is where you can take either one or a series of lump sum payments from your pension. Some of it will be tax-free, some will be taxed. And then a flexi access drawdown is literally what it says, it's flexible access. So it's as and when you want and however you want, really. We've just got to make sure that you've got enough funds to be able to access. That's the main thing, is when not running out of money. You know, one thing as a financial advisor, our job is pretty simple in terms of we want to help you achieve everything you want to do without running out of money, okay? But we've got to make sure that we put all the pieces of the puzzle together. You know, that's the hard part about what we do. It's about making sure we tailor it to you. And it's not just the same for everybody, you know, every single person. I have conversations with clients say, oh, well, someone told me down the pub or someone at work told me this. But actually, it's not their life that we're talking about, it's yours. We want to know what's important to you and how we can help you achieve that. So it's all about tailoring to you and your needs. Next slide, please, Sophie. And I'm going to try and go through this bit quick because I'm just conscious that we are running out of time. So what action should I be taking? So think about what you might want in retirement. What are your goals? What does retirement look like to you? Everyone has this, you know, kind of picture of what retirement looks to them. So we've got to think actually how much income might you require to be able to do that. And then we look at what you've got in place already, your pensions, savings, any other assets, rental properties, you know, shares, whatever it might be. And then we have to look at your liabilities. So for example, if you've got mortgages, loans, credit cards, you know, anything down to SOFA repayments, we need to put that all into, you know, consideration. And you know, it's all about making those extra provisions if we need to kind of fit into what your goals are for retirement. So how we do that, we have what we call cash flow planning. So we have a piece of software where we put all of your, you know, your income, your expenditure, what we think your expenditure is going to be in retirement, all of your assets, your pensions, and then we can put it all on there to see how much you will need. And for example, you know, if your money will kind of cover that. So, you know, that's what we do, and we'd happily sit down with all of you. I think we're on the next slide, and I think this is where you come in, Rachel, I believe.
Thanks, Kritesh and Pam. Are there any questions? I know we've sort of fitted quite a lot into that half an hour, so any questions at all? If you don't fancy saying anything out loud as well, you can always use the chat and Sophie will pick that up, or we can respond to you by email if you want to drop any queries in.
Got a question. What would you recommend to contribute now as 5% of salary? Hang on.
Sorry, Sophie, I didn't quite catch the end of that.
What would you recommend to contribute now as 5% of salary?
I'm not quite getting the question there.
I think what they're trying to allude to is, you know, really, how much should you look? I think when we talk about auto enrollment, yes, you put 5% of your salary in there. You know, work will put, let's say, 3%, and then you have, you know, your tax relief. So in actual fact, 10% of your salary is going into your auto enrollment scheme. But if you don't review your goals, if you don't know what you're doing in retirement, really, we don't know if it's more than enough. You know, we need to understand what you want to do and what you want to achieve in retirement to understand actually how much you might need. You know, some people might need £700,000 in their pension fund to meet their, you know, kind of goals in retirement. Some of the people might only need, let's say, £100,000. It all depends on you and your lifestyle.
Can I ask a question?
So
Hello, you hear me? Is there a maximum age that you can go on putting into a pension? That you can go on? So, I mean, I have a pension and I still have an income. Can I use my income to put it into my pension?
You can. Generally, it's going to be up to 75.
Right.
There are certain decisions that need to be sort of taken at that stage. But if you've got taxable earnings, even if you didn't have taxable earnings, you could still put up to £3,600 a year into a pension. And it used to be years ago, before the pension legislation changed, that we would probably say if you're sort of approaching the end of your career, you may not put as much into a pension because you were driven down the route of buying an annuity, so it didn't make as much difference. But actually, when you're building up a pension sum now, a pension pot, you know, it's just incredibly tax efficient, both from the point of view of the tax relief benefits that you get. It grows virtually tax-free, and of course, any money, as we've already said, you know, is essentially free of inheritance tax. It doesn't form part of your estate when it comes to inheritance tax. So yeah, there's no sort of real age, but 75 would be the point at which you would review, certainly if that was the right thing to still be doing.
Well, yeah, so what happens at 75? Why does that suddenly?
Let me just add to that. At the age of 75, you can still actually pay into a pension, but it no longer becomes tax efficient because you don't get the tax relief back on any contributions that you make from 75 onwards. So usually that is quite a poignant point when you're making a contribution into your pension.
Right.
Yeah. So you pay into it, but you don't get the tax relief back on it.
Too late, but I've never been given that advice before.
Oh, such a shame, such a shame. I mean, I think if you're looking for inheritance tax purposes, then there's no, you know, and you're trying to get away from paying 40%, it is an option. But for tax relief purposes, it does stop at the age of 75 because there is a calculation that's done at the age of 75. Everybody has it at the age of 75 to determine how much pension they actually have, and I think that's probably why there is a cut-off point for the government.
And does that happen as a sort of statutory
Mhm. Yes, it is.
event?
Yes, it is. It is an absolute.
But I've just had my 75th birthday and I haven't heard anything about that from anybody.
No, it usually happens in the background, and I would imagine that you would only really get indicated if you are over what was the lifetime allowance at that particular point, or you've taken more tax-free cash than the 25% of your lifetime allowance limit. And because the lifetime allowance limit has been abolished at the age of 75, there used to be, when you got to the age of 75, if your pension funds were over the 1,073,100, you would be notified, because you would need to pay the government some money, regardless of whether you took that money out, regardless of whether, well, you would have had to have taken the money out, of your pension at that particular point. But they do that particular calculation at the age of 75. But now that they've taken away with the lifetime allowance, your pension is free to grow above that particular amount. So that might be the reason why you haven't heard anything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Julian. Janet, I can see that your hand's raised.
Yes, hi, thank you. So yeah, with regards putting money into your pension pot once you've retired, so my mother-in-law is downsizing, so there's quite a sizable amount of cash income coming in there. We want to avoid inheritance tax. Is there still the 7-year sort of threshold on that if she then passes within that time, or because it's gone into a pension pot, is that irrelevant?
Slightly different question there. Yeah, you can only pay into, the maximum you can pay into a pension is whatever she's earned in that particular tax year, or a maximum of 60,000, whichever is lower. So if you've got a sizable amount of money, there will be limitations as to what you can actually pay in. There is what's called carry forward. So if you've got unused allowances from previous years, you can make use of those into a pension. The 7-year rule you're talking about is if you gift money away to a beneficiary or a loved one, then that person who's gifted away has to survive 7 years before it falls out of their estate, essentially. Does that make sense?
Yep. So even if the pension pot is then part of the estate, that wouldn't be subject to inheritance tax.
No,
in the pension pot.
Yeah, your pensions are ring fenced, so they don't form part of the calculations when you're looking to add up how much of the estate, what the estate actually comes to.
All right, thank you.
And Janet, sorry, I think probably me and Kritesh were going to say the same thing. If mum-in-law's limited because of taxable earnings, that kind of thing, as to what she can put into the pension, there are other investments within, if you go into those sorts of investments within 2 years, as long as you're in for 2 years, it can fall outside of your estate for inheritance tax purposes as well. It relies on something that we call business relief. But if that's something of interest, we can certainly go through the investment options outside of pensions.
Sure.
That could be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? No. Okay, well, I think probably it just remains for me to say thank you very much for attending this evening. I'm sure the garden was very tempting on a lovely evening like this, so we do appreciate your attendance. On screen you've got all of our contact details. If you want to make contact with any of us or all of us, that would be lovely, but we are here to answer any questions that you might have. And if you wanted to arrange an individual session with any of us, then that is something that there is no charge for. And we can sort of talk to you about how any kind of consultation could work. But thank you very much for listening this evening, and yeah, hope you'll have a pleasant evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Have a lovely evening. Bye bye.